During the Second World War, there were a number of brutal police forces that operated that struck fear into the hearts of the public. One of the most feared was the Gestapo, who operated inside German-occupied lands and Nazi Germany, and they helped to ensure that Hitler instilled his dictatorship over the people. The Gestapo instructed the German people to even turn in their neighbours if they suspected that they were anti-Hitler or part of resistance activities. Inside of Italy, after Mussolini took power, there was a fascist police force set up that operated in the same manner to protect his dictatorship. The head of the police in Rome was Pietro Caruso, who was executed by firing squad in September 1944, following his fall from grace and the liberation of Rome. So join us today as we look at the brutal execution of Pietro Caruso, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Pietro Caruso was born on the 10th of November 1899 inside of Campania. Little is known about his early life, but he was active in the First World War. He fought in the Italian army during the final months of the conflict, and he remained inside of the military during the early part of the 1920s. But as many people did across Italy in the 1920s, he joined the National Fascist Party. Mussolini was rising to power rather rapidly, and in 1922, Caruso was involved in the March on Rome. Here Mussolini and his Blackshirts demonstrated and were involved in a coup that resulted in the National Fascist Party and Mussolini becoming in power. Mussolini was appointed Prime Minister on the 29th of October 1922 and served as the dictator of the country as he consolidated his power. The March on Rome was a prominent demonstration, and it left an impression on Hitler, who would later befriend Mussolini and form with him the Axis alliance. Caruso was there at the March on Rome, and he must have been favoured by Mussolini and his men. In 1923 he joined the volunteer militia for national security, who were commonly known as the Blackshirts, and were the paramilitary wing of Mussolini's party. Inside of this there were special militias, who would be in charge of security and other aspects of the government. Caruso eventually rose throughout the ranks, and he became a lieutenant, and then a lieutenant colonel, and he was seen as one of the most senior figures in the paramilitary wing. In 1941 he was involved in legal matters, and served as one of the judges for the Extraordinary Tribunal for Dalmatia. It held 4 trials during its time that imposed 48 death sentences, carrying out 35 of these. This court was involved in lands annexed by the Italians following the Axis invasions and capture of Yugoslavia. Caruso was involved as a judge, and because of this, he would be later accused of being a war criminal. In 1943, following the armistice signed between Italy and Britain, he joined the Italian Socialist Republic and was involved in confiscating gold and property from Jewish populations. With this he was doing the same that Nazi looters were doing, stealing valuables and art from Jews, but then he rose to the chief of police in Rome. He had met Tullio Tamburini, and Caruso and him became close, and before becoming the chief of police in Rome, he was appointed the police chief in Verona. It was whilst he was serving as the chief of police in Rome that Pietro Caruso organised the Ardeatine Massacre. During this, 335 civilians and political prisoners were killed inside of the quarries near to Rome. The reason this was ordered was that there was an attack against the SS police in central Rome the previous day, in which a bomb had killed 28 SS policemen and 2 civilians. Reprisals for killing SS men and Germans was brutal, especially in occupied lands. For this, Caruso and his Gestapo equivalent ordered the mass killing of over 300 people, many innocent civilians, who were rounded up and gathered in Rome before being marched out to the quarries. The killings took place with executioners placing bullets into the heads of the men who had knelt down in front of them, and there were so many bodies that the caves were blown up to try and conceal the crimes. One of those executed was Maurizio Giglio, a lieutenant who served under Caruso, but had been caught spying for the Allies and the Americans. This massacre haunted the people of Rome, as such brutality against innocent civilians was not forgotten. As the war turned against the Germans, and things fell apart in Rome as it was liberated, Pietro Caruso was arrested by the liberators and handed over to the Italians. For his crimes, in being a collaborator and involved in massacres, he was sentenced to death, and this execution would take place inside of a courtyard in the Fort Brevetta in Rome, and was carried out by a police firing squad. It was said of the execution of Pietro Caruso, a closed grey van drove into the courtyard of the fort. It stopped by a hillock of brown grass. In front of the hillock stood a bare pine chair. A van's rear door opened. A group of Italian men in grey-green uniforms stepped out. One of them carried crutches, and a priest came out next, and then did Pietro Caruso. Caruso, it was said, was the most hated man in Rome after Mussolini, and it was said he had an apartment where he himself tortured victims with his bare hands. He had a broken hip when he went to his execution. It was said his left foot barely touched the ground as he was led forward to his execution. He stood when he heard the death sentence as it was read out, and he was wearing a bright blue well-cut suit and a white handkerchief from his jacket pocket. As the firing squad stood opposite him, he said to them, "Aim well." He was then taken to the chair and had trouble on it with his hip. His body was then bound to it, and he was left speaking to the priest. Caruso said one final prayer and kissed a tiny crucifix that the Pope had sent him, and then the priest stepped away. Caruso was not facing his executioners, he was turned away from them. He turned his head a little, and he cried out, "Viva l'Italia!" 8 standing men and 8 kneeling men aimed their rifles, and the signal to shoot was then given. They fired well into him. The shots entered his back and also his head, causing a rather bloody scene. Execution by shooting a seating man in the back was an old fascist custom, so it was only fitting that Caruso died in this way. Pietro Caruso was a war criminal whose actions as the chief of police in Rome, despite coming into the position late in the war, caused a lot of hurt and devastation. He is mostly associated today with the massacre of over 300 civilians following the bombing of the SS men, and for being in the pockets of the Germans and also the Gestapo. Like so many who rose with the dictators during the Second World War, Caruso met his end in a bloody way, being sentenced to death and at the barrel of a firing squad. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.